My brother demanded I hand over my inheritance because I'm a man, it's rightfully mine. When I refused, he brought my whole family to my office to humiliate me. Before he left, he smirked, "Enjoy your last day here." The next morning, I walked in and found my desk empty. Then my boss said something that made my blood run cold. I never thought my own family would turn against me like this. Sure, we had our differences growing up, but I never imagined it would come to this, being publicly humiliated, sabotaged, and ultimately betrayed by my own brother. But here I am. This all started after my mother passed away last year. It was sudden. She wasn't sick, or at least, not that I knew of. One night, she just went to bed and never woke up. The grief was unbearable. I was her only daughter, and we were close. My two brothers, on the other hand, had been distant for years. Especially my older brother, Richard. Richard always had this idea that he was the center of the family, the rightful heir to everything. He was the eldest, the son, the man of the house after our father passed. That's how he saw himself. Never mind that he never took care of Mom, never called her, never visited unless it was for money. Meanwhile, I was the one who took her to her doctor's appointments, ran errands, handled her bills when she got too tired to do them herself. So, when the will was read, I wasn't surprised that Mom left me the majority of her estate. It wasn't much, just her house and a modest savings account, but it was everything to her. My younger brother, Eric, got some money too, and Richard? Well, he got something, but apparently it wasn't enough. The moment we stepped out of the lawyer's office, Richard cornered me in the hallway. "That money is mine," he hissed. "That house is mine." "No, it's Mom's," I shot back. "And she decided to leave it to me." Richard scoffed. "You're a woman. You don't need it. I'm the eldest son, it should go to me." I laughed, but not because it was funny. Because it was pathetic. That's not how this works. That's not how anything works. He stormed off, but I knew that wasn't the end of it. For the next few weeks, I kept getting messages from him. Angry, entitled messages demanding that I hand everything over. At first, I ignored him. Then the guilt tripping started. He'd send messages about how family should take care of each other, and how could I be so selfish? When that didn't work, he got more aggressive, accusing me of being heartless, a thief, even a disgrace to our family. I held my ground. Then, one day, he showed up at my office. And he didn't come alone. I work in a fairly professional environment, a corporate office where everything is supposed to be handled with class and decorum. So you can imagine my shock when, right in the middle of the workday, Richard marched in with our entire extended family in tow. Aunts, uncles, cousins, people I hadn't seen in years, all walking into my workplace like they owned the place. Before I could even process what was happening, Richard started talking. Loudly. "Everyone, I want you all to see the kind of person my sister has become." He turned to my coworkers, who were now staring in stunned silence. "Do you all know she stole from her own family? That she took everything our mother left behind and refused to share it?" I felt my face go hot. My boss was standing nearby, eyebrows raised, clearly trying to figure out if he should intervene. I took a deep breath and tried to keep my voice calm. "This is not the place for this, Richard. You need to leave." But he wasn't done. "Oh no, everyone should hear this. My sister, the one you all think is so professional and hardworking, she's a liar. A selfish, greedy liar who threw away her own family because of money." Then, to my horror, some of my relatives started clapping. My aunt, who I barely spoke to, shook her head in disappointment. "Shame on you," she muttered. "Your poor mother would be heartbroken." That's when I realized. They had all been fed his lies. He had gone to each of them, spun some story about how I stole everything and turned them against me. And now, they were here, dragging my name through the mud in my own workplace. I clenched my fists. I wanted to scream. But I knew that's exactly what he wanted, for me to lose my temper, to make a scene, to look like the bad guy. So I did the only thing I could do. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Leave." Now, he smirked. "Enjoy your last day here." Then, just like that, he turned and walked out, the rest of my so-called family following behind him. I stood there, humiliated, my stomach in knots. I could already hear whispers among my coworkers. My boss looked like he wanted to say something but decided against it. I didn't know what Richard meant by that last comment, but I had a bad feeling. The next morning, I walked into the office, and my desk was empty. At first, I thought maybe it was just a mistake. But then my boss called me into his office, and the moment he spoke, my blood ran cold. "We need to talk about the accusations against you." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "What accusations?" He sighed, looking uncomfortable. "We received an anonymous report about financial misconduct. A serious one. It claims you've been misusing company funds." I felt sick. "That's ridiculous. I would never," he held up a hand. "I want to believe you. But this report came with some concerning documents. Then he slid a folder across the desk. I opened it, and my whole body went numb. Inside were fabricated emails, bank statements, even fake signatures, my signature. It was all expertly forged, making it look like I had been stealing from the company. I could barely get the words out. This isn't real. This is fake. My boss nodded slowly. Maybe, but corporate takes this kind of thing seriously. There's going to be an investigation. Effective immediately, you're on unpaid leave. I wanted to scream, to cry, to do something. But all I could do was sit there, staring at the folder as the realization sank in. Richard had done this. And he had just ruined my life. I sat there, staring at the forged documents, my hands shaking. My boss was still talking, but I couldn't hear him. My mind was racing. This was Richard. It had to be. He wanted to ruin me because I wouldn't hand over what he thought was his. And he knew exactly where to hit me, my job. He must have spent weeks planning this, creating fake emails, falsifying transactions, making sure it looked real enough to raise suspicion. And now I was paying the price. When I finally found my voice, it came out hoarse. What happens now? My boss sighed, rubbing his temples. Corporate will investigate. You're suspended until further notice. If they find anything that backs up these claims, HR will move forward with termination. And if it's serious enough, they might even press charges. I gripped the arms of my chair so hard my knuckles turned white. Charges. As in, legal charges. As in, I could lose everything, not just my job, but my reputation, my future. This wasn't just a petty revenge stunt. Richard was trying to destroy me. I forced myself to take a deep breath. I didn't do this. You know I didn't do this. He hesitated. I want to believe that. But you have to understand, this isn't just about what I think. This is about evidence. I wanted to scream. I had worked here for years. I had put in long hours, sacrificed weekends, missed holidays to meet deadlines. And now, with one anonymous report, my entire career was crashing down around me. I had to clear my name. The investigation the next few days were a blur. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. My work email was locked, my access to the office revoked. My coworkers, some of whom I considered friends, stopped responding to my texts. I needed proof that I was being set up. I started with my personal email, digging through every message I had ever sent from my work account. If Richard had faked emails under my name, I had to find discrepancies, something to prove they weren't real. But everything he had forged was so well done, it was frightening. Then I remembered something. My company had a strict policy. Every single email sent through our work server was automatically backed up to a secured database. If I could access those backups, I could compare timestamps, maybe even prove I never sent those messages in the first place. The problem? Only IT and senior management had access to that database. And I had just been put on unpaid leave, meaning I couldn't even step foot inside the office. That's when I made a decision. A risky one. I needed to get into that system. I reached out to an old coworker, Daniel. He worked in IT and had always been friendly toward me. I knew I was asking for a huge favor, but I had no choice. At first, he was hesitant. Look, I don't want to get involved in whatever's going on, okay? The company takes security really seriously. I get it, I said quickly. But I know I've been set up. And I just need proof. If you can help me pull up those email logs, I can clear my name. There was a long pause. Then he sighed. Fine. But if anyone finds out, I could lose my job. Daniel, I swear, I won't let that happen. A few hours later, he sent me a file. And what I found made my heart pound. The first break in the case, Richard had been sloppy. The emails that supposedly came from me, they had all been sent from an external IP address, one that wasn't registered to my company's server. Meaning? They never came from my work computer. Even better, the timestamps on the fake emails showed that they were sent at times when I was logged into the office network doing other tasks. If I had really been sending fraudulent transactions, I couldn't have been in two places at once. I had him, but I needed more. I needed something undeniable. Then, a thought hit me. Richard wasn't exactly a genius when it came to covering his tracks. If he had gone through this much trouble, he would have needed access to my personal information, things like old passwords, security questions. And that meant he had probably snooped through my emails before. I started digging through my own login history, and there it was, multiple failed login attempts to my email, all coming from an IP address that wasn't mine. I traced it, and my blood ran cold. It was linked to an address I knew. Richard's house. The confrontation, I wasted no time. I drove straight to Richard's house, my heart hammering in my chest. I didn't even bother knocking, I stormed inside, slamming the door behind me. Richard was on the couch, beer in hand, looking way too pleased with himself. Well, he drawled. How's unemployment treating you? I threw the printed logs onto his coffee table. You really thought I wouldn't find out? His smirk faltered for half a second. Just a flicker of uncertainty. Then he leaned back, pretending to be unfazed. I have no idea what you're talking about. I pointed at the papers. These emails? The ones accusing me of stealing from my company? They weren't sent from my work network. They were sent from an outside IP. And guess where that IP traces back to? He rolled his eyes. This is ridiculous, your house. His face twitched. I took a step closer, lowering my voice. I don't know what you thought was going to happen, Richard. Did you think I'd just let you destroy my life? That I wouldn't fight back? For the first time, I saw a crack in his confidence. I wasn't scared of him anymore. But before I could press further, my phone buzzed. It was my boss. I hesitated, then answered. Hello? His voice was tense. We need you to come into the office. Right now. I swallowed hard. Why? He hesitated. Because corporate just received another complaint against you. I felt like the ground had just been ripped out from under me. Another complaint? What the hell was going on? I turned back to Richard, and that smirk was back, wider this time, smug. Oops, he said mockingly. Guess I forgot to mention. I wasn't finished yet. Richard's smirk made my stomach twist. I gripped my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. What did you do? He shrugged, leaning back against the couch like he didn't have a care in the world. Just tying up loose ends. My boss's voice buzzed in my ear. Are you still there? I forced myself to respond. I'll be right in. I hung up and glared at Richard. If you think you can keep this up, you're dead wrong. He laughed. Actually laughed. And if you think this is over, you're stupider than I thought. I wanted to slap that smug look off his face. But I had no time for him. I needed to get to my office and figure out what the hell was happening. I turned on my heel and stormed out, my heart pounding. The second complaint when I arrived at the office, the tension was thick enough to choke me. People stared as I walked past, whispering behind their hands. My stomach churned. My boss was waiting in the conference room, along with someone I hadn't expected, HR. That was a bad sign. I sat down. What's going on? My boss exhaled sharply, sliding a folder across the table. We got another report this morning. This one is worse. I opened the folder. My heart stopped. Inside were screenshots. Dozens of them. Messages, texts, emails, all supposedly from me. And they were bad. Racist comments. Threats. Even blackmail. Every single one looked like I had written them. I shook my head. These are fake. The HR rep, a woman named Diane, frowned. They came from your company email. I snapped my head toward my boss. Check the logs. Just like last time, check the server logs and you'll see they weren't sent from my computer. Diane exchanged a glance with my boss. We already did. My blood ran cold. What do you mean? She folded her hands. Unlike the financial documents, these emails were sent from your workstation. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. That's impossible. My boss's voice was tight. We checked, and the messages were sent using your login credentials from your office computer. You were logged in at the time. My hands went numb. No, this didn't make sense. Unless I swallowed hard. Can I see the exact timestamps? Diane slid me a paper. I scanned it, my heart hammering. Then I saw it. The messages were sent at times when I wasn't even in the office. Security cameras, I blurted. Pull the footage. If my computer was used, you'll see who was sitting at my desk. My boss looked skeptical, but after a moment, he nodded. I'll have security review it. Diane leaned forward. In the meantime, we have no choice but to extend your suspension. I clenched my fists under the table. I had proof that Richard had faked the financial misconduct. But this was something else. He had somehow used my actual work computer. And that meant he had help. The inside man, I didn't go home. Instead, I drove straight to the only person who could have pulled this off, someone from inside the company. I knocked on Daniel's door. He looked startled to see me. Hey, I pushed past him, stepping into his apartment. I need you to tell me the truth. Daniel paled. What the emails? I snapped. The fake messages. My login credentials. Someone used my work computer while I wasn't there. How? He shut the door, rubbing his face. I don't know what you're talking about. I glared at him. Don't lie to me, Daniel. I know you helped me before, but if you're involved in this, I didn't do anything, he blurted. Then he hesitated, glancing toward his laptop on the counter. I followed his gaze. What? He sighed. Look, I swear I didn't do anything to you. But a couple of weeks ago, someone asked me how to reset a password remotely. I didn't think much of it at the time. I assumed it was just an IT request. Who? He hesitated. Terry. My stomach dropped. Terry. My coworker. The one who had always sided with Richard growing up. They were friends. I should have seen this coming. I turned toward the door. Daniel grabbed my arm. Be careful. I pulled away. I don't have time to be careful. I had to get to Terry. Another betrayal. I stormed into Terry's office without knocking. He looked up, feigning surprise. Oh, hey, aren't you on leave? I slammed my hands onto his desk. Cut the crap. I know what you did. His smirk was identical to Richard's. That same smug, self-satisfied expression. I have no idea what you're talking about. You used my computer. You sent those messages. Why? He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. Let's just say, I owed Richard a favor. My blood boiled. For what? Terry shrugged. Does it matter? He asked for help. I helped. I wanted to scream. You framed me for financial fraud. You framed me for harassment. Do you have any idea what you've done? He smirked. Yeah. I got you out of the way. A sickening realization hit me. Out of the way for what? Terry just smiled. I stormed out, my hands shaking. I needed to get back to my boss. To show him everything. But when I stepped outside, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I answered. Hello? A low chuckle came through the line. Looks like you're catching on, Richard's voice sneered. But you're too late. I gritted my teeth. You're not going to get away with this. Oh, I already have. His tone was dripping with amusement. By the way, you might want to check the news. I pulled my phone away and opened a news app. And then I saw it. My face, plastered on the front page. Disgraced employee under investigation for embezzlement and workplace harassment. My vision blurred. Richard wasn't just trying to get me fired. He was making sure I'd never work again. I stared at the news article, my entire body numb. Richard had done it. He had taken this beyond our family, beyond my workplace. He had dragged my name through the mud publicly. I wasn't just under investigation anymore. In the eyes of the world, I was already guilty. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing, texts from old coworkers, distant friends, even some extended family members who had seen the article. Some messages were full of concern, asking if I was okay. Others weren't so kind. I couldn't sit back and let this happen. I needed to end this. The final confrontation, I didn't go home. I didn't go to my lawyer. I went straight to Richard's house. I should have expected that he'd be celebrating. When I walked in, I saw him lounging on the couch, beer in hand, his laptop open in front of him. He didn't even flinch when he saw me. Wow, he said, clicking his tongue. You really don't know when to quit, do you? I slammed my hands on the coffee table. You went too far, Richard. He just grinned. Too far? No, this is perfect. You always thought you were better than me, didn't you? The perfect daughter. The responsible one. The successful one. His voice dripped with mockery. Well, look at you now. You're nothing. No job. No reputation. No one will hire you after this. I clenched my fists. You did all this over Mom's house? He scoffed. This isn't just about the house. It's about respect. I deserve to be the one in charge, but she gave it to you. He sneered. And you didn't even hesitate to take it. I shook my head in disbelief. You never wanted the responsibility, Richard. You never cared about her, not when she was alive, and certainly not now. This isn't about respect. This is about your ego. He chuckled, leaning back. Doesn't matter now, does it? The world thinks you're a fraud. They think you're a thief. You've already lost. I swallowed down the lump in my throat. I wasn't going to let him win. I pulled out my phone and pressed play. Richard's own voice filled the room. I got you out of the way. Guess I forgot to mention. I wasn't finished yet. His smirk vanished. I let the recording keep playing, his confession, his arrogance, his own words incriminating him. When it ended, I tucked my phone back into my pocket. You're right about one thing, Richard. I stepped closer. I have lost a lot. But you? You just lost everything. His jaw clenched. I already sent this to my lawyer, to my boss, to every single person who needed to hear it. His face drained of color. I took another step forward, my voice steady. You wanted to ruin my life, but now? You're the one under investigation. His mouth opened, but no words came out. For the first time in his miserable life, Richard had nothing to say. It unraveled quickly after that. My lawyer wasted no time sending the recording to my company. Within hours, my boss called me, furious that Richard had manipulated everything. They launched their own internal investigation, which confirmed that Terry had been involved. Both he and Richard were slapped with lawsuits, fraud, defamation, conspiracy. Richard tried to fight it, but there was too much evidence. He was forced to publicly retract the allegations. But the damage to his reputation was done. Family members who had sided with him suddenly wanted to talk. Aunts, uncles, cousins, they all reached out, saying they had been misled and didn't know the full story. I ignored them. They had believed him when it was convenient. They had humiliated me in my workplace without question. I owed them nothing. Terry lost his job. Richard? He lost everything. He had always been reckless with money, always expecting someone to bail him out. With legal fees piling up, No one left to manipulate and no job. He found himself cornered. I heard through the grapevine that he had to sell his car, then his furniture. Then, in the most ironic twist of all, he lost his apartment. Meanwhile, I got my job back. My boss personally apologized for how the company had handled everything, and while things weren't the same, I still felt the weight of everything I had been through. I was free. And the house? It stayed with me. One night, months after everything had settled, I stood in my mother's house, staring out the window. The same house Richard had tried so desperately to take. I thought about everything I had lost. My faith in my family. My peace of mind. The belief that blood automatically meant loyalty. But I also thought about everything I had gained. I had fought for myself. I had won. And Richard? Well, he had made his bed. And now he had to lie in it.